So, question. Across the Spiderverse. Is it a good movie? Well, let's take a few moments to talk about that. No plot spoilers here, folks, at least not major ones. And hello, I'm MangaKamen. I'm not gonna lie, I had my skepticism before seeing the movie. Even this part of the script I wrote before I saw the film just so I could be honest about my feelings going in, and then reflecting on them when I came out of the film. My skepticisms were rooted in my experience, not only with creators and sequels, but also the landscape of how the internet works. As an online figure who talks about pop culture, at times you can't help but be inundated with the information about the films and games you wish to talk about. While I had done my best to avoid spoilers of the film, which is a near impossibility nowadays with social media, I was met with people voicing their opinions on the film, and a lot of people were remarking that it was a perfect film or near perfect. So as I typed this part up of the script, I need to tell you that my expectations when seeing those remarks will build up the hype of the film and at times can be detrimental to said film as well. Not helped by people acting insufferable when someone voices any sort of criticism of said film, and not helping in that regard with how they act. Maybe it's just the jaded critic in my soul crying out in the darkness. But when I see that sort of thing in my experience, it's a signal of things not being as good as people make it out to be. Still, I try not to let my emotions or dummies on the line paint my thoughts about a film or video game as I go into it. And as such, give me some time to actually watch the film, and let's talk about it.
Sir, please just let me rob you!
So, after seeing the movie, I'm going to bring up how you should go see it. Yes, even past burnout from the deluge of superhero movies is enough to make me enjoy this film. Although, to be honest, I was just glad I didn't get kicked in the back of the head this time. Spiderverse has this blend of good art direction, cinematography, intriguing story, and level of humor to it that makes it a cut above the average superhero flick. Like, no contest, this is probably one of the better superhero pieces of cinema that I've seen in the last few years, and God, you guys have no idea. It's like being a man thirsty in the desert and finally finding a cool, brisk drink to put down your throat. The film itself takes a lot of elements from its comic book origins, often using the paneling and even some of the thought bubbles to show small tidbits of characters or even some fun facts. Standard fare for the medium of comics that I wish other forms of media used. Like, other than the first movie and this one, the only other time I can recall something like this was with the Deadpool video game. It's so boring!
Damn it, Wade!
What also helps is the fact that the Spider-Man characters all have a different art style to them that helps make them stand out from the others. So when you have the less sporadic scenes, it makes more visually appealing set pieces. Moonbutton being a prime example of that for location. However, and this is the part where I'm probably going to get slapped down, I feel that because of that, when we get to the more character-fleshed action pieces, it was hard to see what was really going on. Part of the reasoning for this was the opening Vulture fight scene, which was the first time I noticed that it was hard to tell with some of the choreography in action. The second time was with the Spider-Man chase scene, and that's one where a lot of people saw with the trailers. The massive blend of art styles and so many characters along with the speed made it a little hard for me to really follow the details of some of the characters. And I get it, that's the point of a chase scene. It's supposed to be bombastic and rush through since, well, that's what a chase scene is all about. So here's the thing, I'm a bit of a stickler when it comes to action scenes, both fighting, chasing, what have you. I fully realize that this is an issue that I have and it may not be universal, but this did affect my enjoyment of the film. To me, action scenes, especially with fight scenes, need to be visually clear to the audience to follow them. At the moment, you're seeing a scene from Kamen Rider Geats, and while it has a lot going on in the scene, it's also visually distinct so you guys can really see what's going on in the fight despite how fast-paced the action can get. I'm not saying that this is a universal standard, nor that you have to actually agree with me. Films are by nature subjective in that regard, and the issues I have aren't exactly going to be applicable to others for one. That and the fact I can find a way to gush around Kamen Rider Geats in my videos, I will. I do appreciate the storytelling in this film and how the art direction did actually help that out quite a bit. I can always appreciate when the artistic medium is used to help tell the story. There's quite a bit of development given to Gwen in this movie as we get more insight to her backstory and her family life. In the original Spider-Verse, she was a secondary character who did get a fair bit more attention than the rest of the secondary characters. She was like the third Spider character and as such got more screen time and characterization in that film. But when we get to the sequel here, we do get to see her backstory. It's pretty much the first thing we see in the movie, as well as the issues that she has with her father. And at one point, we return to that scene, and not to give too many spoilers, there was a melting effect that really went along with the colorization of the film, and the scene in and of itself, it acted as a visual representation of the character breaking down. It really allowed me to appreciate the characterization for Gwen and how she got in this film, and really fleshed her out as a character. And to appropriately reflect that in the set piece design makes the scenes all the more effective and pop out more in my head, even days after I'd seen the film. But at that same time, I do think there's a bit too much color, as I stated beforehand. I almost thought at times that the action was happening, that I was watching that one episode of Pokemon that made Porygon a forbidden icon. When my eyes aren't bleeding, I'll happily admit that one of my favorite techniques in animation is when color is played around with and changed. It really lends to the scenes to make a lot more memorable and highlight more important aspects. I can also appreciate that the technique wasn't overused in that regard, although that might be because of the aforementioned specialized styles for each world. I will say that perhaps where I was seated in the film area, that the visuals didn't land for me, but then again, since I didn't get kicked to the head, I can't really complain. I will also concede that I really did appreciate the Spot in this film, and how it turned out that he was connected to Miles.
He took a bagel! Alright, time to swing, just like I...
Damn you, Bagels! While his fight scene initially was chaotic and funny, I confess it could be a tad bit confusing, but I can appreciate the entertainment value of the character. That whole scene was amazingly funny. When it comes to the more comedic aspects, like there was even a scene where the Spot was able to just go to the convenience store that showed up in a Spiderverse, and the clerk essentially just got used to the batshit insanity that keeps having their shot. That was entertaining. This leads into the comedy. Where the comedy works, it's good. I preferred a lot of the more sarcastic and tongue-in-cheek moments. You know, before Marvel decided to make everyone and their mother into a sarcastic bastard, one of the more iconic aspects of Spider-Man was his wit and annoying personality. This goes for Peter Parker and Miles Morales. It's why when you had this scene where Peter Parker gained control of his body back and gave Gobby here a remark about a man purse, Gobby was able to instantly recognize Peter. So when the Spiders were able to actually talk to each other and play off each other, it really works when it comes to comedy.
Will you adopt me? What?
Most of the time. When it comes to referential humor, I will say it wasn't that bad either. After all, with the exception of the Spider-Man pointing gag, a lot of the more referential bits were contained in the background or were used to greater effect. What I'm saying is that while they were there, they weren't so much in your face. I will say I was surprised to see quite a few faces from some of my favorite Spider-Man titles, which I do appreciate and can say they didn't overstay their welcome, although I was severely disappointed with the lack of a certain Spider-Man, the Tokusatsu Spider-Man himself, Takuya Yamashiro, which one of the producers, Phil Lord, did hint that he was going to be in the film. Oh well, I guess Toku Spider-Man died for our sins. Here's hoping he'll be in part 3. We got Peter parked car, but not the emissary from hell? What the hell? Not to get too deep into spoilers, so I'll be vague as all hell when it comes to the story. The first movie's plot beat, I guess there's spoilers for that one, although I don't know why you'd be watching a video about the sequel if you didn't know about the first one. The plot was essentially a coming-of-age story for Miles, as well as passing the torch, since Peter Parker in that movie, well, he died. And as such, with Miles now becoming essentially that universal Spider-Man, he had to figure out what that means to him and how to become his own Spider-Man. Across the Spiderverse actually branches off of that, and not to give too much away, it's basically what it means to be a Spider-Man as well as finding your own path. Not to mention showing the dangers of closing off alternative ways of thinking and the dangers of groupthink. It's that whole imposter syndrome case where you're part of a group, but in actuality you're not. It's a nice psychological aspect with Miles in this case, and really feels like a natural step for his characterization in this series to continue with. I really do appreciate that the storytelling in this as well as the characterization in this film. I do think that some focus did leave the main villain of the plot, the Spot, especially since they decided to make him out to be an anti-Spiral. Like, I dig that shadowy look for the character. I love how essentially his motive becoming more and more dangerous is because he got called the villain of the week by Miles. It's petty, but not only does the guy start off entertaining and grows into be a real threat throughout the story, it feels rather disappointing that the focus of the character essentially disappears in the final third of it. And while I won't spoil the ending, I will say that the movie does end on a cliffhanger. And I was quite entertained to hear all the groans in my movie theater when they saw the words, "To be continued." I wasn't disappointed since the loudmouths on Twitter already complained about this verbally, but I do feel like there was a bit of a disappointment going on in that regard for those who weren't so keen on checking their social medias. There is one thing I do need to bring up quickly with the multiverse aspect. I don't think that this is a spoiler since it's the point of the entire movie and was in promos. Disclaimer, I am not a huge fan of multiverse stories. Funnily enough, it's because of the recent MCU phase that caused that. And hell, even Spiderverse makes fun of Doctor Strange's movie with that. And for good reason, because at the very least, there's a logical reasoning as for why things happen. And the conflict between Miles and the rest of the Spider-Verse makes a lot of sense. Granted, I do think it's a bit too convenient that almost every Spider-Man, save for Miles and Punk Spider, actually agree with the concept of the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. I've argued in the past that this is a very intriguing aspect when it comes to conflict in writing, where someone is willing to sacrifice a smaller number of people, or even a town, or a world, or whatever, in order to save the greater good. It works here with the plot of the movie, and with Miles having an actual skin in the game, it helps propel his personal motivation to turn against the Spider-Man of other universes. The only thing I'd say that feels off is, again, only about 2 Spider-Men seem to be against this mindset. This scene right here from the Sam Raimi films is a good example of what I'm trying to get at.
Let die the woman you love? Or suffer the little children?
One of Spider-Man's, and I mean this from an entire character aspect, is that of the wanting to save everyone. It's a recurrent theme with the great power comes great responsibility. Hell, I'd even argue it's the core theme of being a Spider-Man. And we see that the Spider-Friends essentially go against that core element. It's something that made me tilt my head, but probably not in a bad way, but in a way that made me fascinated and also somewhat disappointed, and you get the idea. Because if you have your character essentially go against the grain or their core elements, it can be used for great effect when the story is concluded. Or it can blow up in your face. I do realize that throughout this video I've been rather critical of the Spiderverse, and I'm going to explain why. Across the Spiderverse is definitely a great movie. Hell, I'd argue it's probably one of the better ones this year, and we're only halfway done with this damn year. But with the original movie being such a landmark in not only superhero entertainment, but also the animation industry, where tons of other amazingly animated films take elements from it were made, and incidentally inspired the garbage fare that is Velma somehow, the bar was raised greatly, and that bar is going to be different heights for different people. As well as some people's tolerance for some aspects is going to be different based on what they like. To give an example, I watched the film with my girlfriend, and when Punk Spider-Man, Hobie, appeared and gave his introduction, I was honestly put off by the character, but she greatly enjoyed his anarchist attitude. Hobie did grow on me during the film as he gave Miles support at one point to help him escape, and I could see more positive traits, but that's my point. Not everyone is going to enjoy the same things, and not everyone's going to think the same. Other people are going to have different takes and opinions, as well as how they react to aspects of these films. Which is insanely ironic considering that one of the messages of the film is that groupthink is a bit of an issue, and how it can be a terrible and toxic mindset. That isn't to say you have to agree with my opinion. Hell, I'm well aware that I have an opinion that's unpopular that'll get me slapped with an umbrella. I still think the movie is great, but I don't really agree with it being the perfect movie like a lot of people have said it is. It's probably one of the better sequels I've seen in cinema, and that's to be celebrated. This movie comes with a highly respectable recommendation. Granted, I would say that it'd be better to watch the film on a smaller screen. Some clips I've seen online look better to me on an HD screen than a movie theater. But what do I care? I'm just a dude on the internet making an opinion. What's the worst that could happen?